This is Ileen Aland, and we're doing the history of her, personal history. Okay, Grandma, when and where were your parents born?
My mother was born in Wales, and my father was born in Colville, Utah.
Do you know when?
Right offhand, I don't.
Okay, we've got the dates in here.
Yeah.
Do you know how they met?
I don't. Oh, kind of. My father was working at a logging camp in a mill, and my mother was the cook.
Oh, how romantic.
How old was she when they met?
She was probably 16, and he was 5 years older. That'd make him, what, 21?
Yeah. Do you know how they got married or anything like that? Where they were married?
They were married at a civil ceremony, but later they were married in the temple.
Okay, I need your brothers and sisters' names and birth dates. Do you know?
Well, you have those all written down.
Okay, yeah.
So we'll just skip that.
Okay, how about some stories about your brothers and sisters? Do you have any? About who you associated with the best, who you got along well with or something?
Well, they all babied me to death, and I got along well with all of them. I had no trouble. Of course, Dave and I would fight. We were closer to the same age, and we'd fight a little bit, but I don't really remember doing much fighting. But they all babied me and let me have my own way and everything, and I guess I was spoiled.
Hate to admit that. Okay, let me see if this is coming off. Okay, this now. What do you know? What time you were born?
I think it was after 12
At night.
at night. I don't know just exactly what time, but it was in the night. December 29th.
Okay.
And there was a terrible blizzard and a lot of snow. And my mother was having a terrible time. And my older brother went to get a midwife. I don't even remember who. And I was born premature, 2 months premature. And I was so small, they had to put me on a pillow. Find me. And they had an awful time saving me because I was such a crayon.
How did they do that in those days? I mean, without incubators and all that stuff.
Put me on a pillow, and they couldn't
Kept you
dress
warm,
me or
yeah.
anything because I was so small and such a fragile little ugly thing.
Mom, were you premature? So you both were, huh?
Yes.
And small, ugly. It is. Okay, let's see. You were born in Idaho.
Yes.
Okay. In the USA. Because it has country here. Okay. What kind of house? Were you born in the house?
Yes.
What kind of house was it?
It was a log house, a 2-story log house. And it was by a river, by the Teton River, but it wasn't in Teton Valley. It was in near St. Anthony. It's called Wilford.
Was your dad there?
Yes, I'm sure he was.
But he wasn't much help.
Well, I guess he was running around.
Yeah, probably just looking for somebody.
Anyway,
Okay.
he didn't have doctors most time and go clear out here to nowhere.
Visits from your grandparents or other relatives that you can remember?
I remember my
Visitors in your home.
my mother's mother visiting us when we lived in Teton Valley. And she was a dear
From
thing.
Wales she came?
Yeah, no, she lived in Utah. And she was a very dear, lovable person. And it seemed to me like she was big and fat. I don't know. My memories of her, it goes way back. and she would make tea and give me tea, and my mother was upset about it because she was feeding me tea all the time. But oh, I thought that was great. She put a lot of sugar and cream in it and make it good. And I remember my father's father visiting us, and he was such a jolly, sweet little guy, but I was afraid of him.
Was he big or something?
I don't think so. I
wonder
don't.
why
When you're little, you don't know how big people
Yeah.
are, but I'm sure he wasn't very big. And I remember him having a $20 gold piece and losing it, and my mother was so upset about it, and after us kids, she's afraid some of us had taken it or something, and made us all feel so guilty. And they finally found it. We had an outside toilet, and he had gone to this toilet, and when he let his pants down, it fell out of the pocket. So they found the $20 gold piece.
That's good.
So I do remember that.
Uh-huh. Do you remember any accidents? Or
I remember my mother having an accident. It was on the 4th of July, and we were all in the buggy. All of us little kids, all fixed up, going to the big celebration. They always had a celebration the 4th of July with all kind of goodies and fireworks and what have you. And we were riding in the buggy, and we went over a bump, and my dad always carried an axe, a sharp axe, and it cut my mother's foot. Just real bad, and it just bled. I can see that blood now all over the place. And she had to take the petticoat off to wrap around it to stop the blood. And that's all I remember about it. I don't know what happened to us, but I do remember that.
that would be painful.
It was horrible. I'm still seeing all that blood.
Do you remember playmates? Anything in particular? Or did you just mostly have your family and to play with?
When Jareen was born on my 5th birthday, and I was so happy to have a little girl, I was just crazy about, I needed playmates. We lived up at the mill, and we were stuck away from everybody. That was before I started to school. And, oh, I always wanted a little girl to play with. And when Jareen was born, I was so happy. And her and I, as she grew, we were the best of pals, and she was my best friend and playmate all the time through my childhood.
Now, you can tell about trips or vacations that you've had to take.
Well, I used to go to stay with Maine in the summer. She lived on a ranch near St. Anthony, and I would have to go stay with her because her and Elder were alone. And I hated to go. I didn't want to leave my mother. But I'd have to go every summer.
How old were you when you first had to go?
I really don't know, probably 7 or so. But that went on for years until they got big enough they didn't need me, or I got too big to go or something.
But that was to help with the milking and
Yes.
shearing the sheep and all that. Did you help with that?
No,
just...
Elda and I would take the cows to pasture, or we'd have to take them down the lane. There was a lot of feed in the lane for them, and we would be with those cows all day long. And sometimes the canals would be filled with water. And this sounds crazy, and it doesn't sound truthful. Just 2 little girls, probably 8 and 10, taking those cows out there and going through that water, and we'd get a hold of the cow's tail to go through there because the water was swift and over our heads, and why they would let us do things like that. If my mother had known that, she would have died. But we'd take them and stay out all day with those stupid cows.
But you had somebody to play with then,
Yeah,
a
Elder and
friend.
I had fun together.
Is she your age? Was she your age?
She was 3 years older. And she was the leader, of course.
The oldest.
And then there was some little girls that we played with. And Katie, but I don't remember the other one's name. But someplace along the place where we herd the cows, these 2 little girls, we enjoyed those because I love other girls. That's the reason I still love girls, I guess. I'm so hungry for them.
She had brothers.
Lots of brothers. And I had sisters, but they were older.
Okay, now your church activities, religious convictions taught in your home.
We were taught to believe in prayer, and we had prayer for every meal. And when we were young, we always had family prayer in the morning before breakfast. I remember we would all get on our knees and have prayer.
Did you gather around the table? Or?
Yes, we would gather around the table, and then we would all get on our knees at our chairs or benches, whatever we had, and have a family prayer. I do remember that when we were little.
So it really does teach. It really does. It's important then to teach your children.
It is
Because
very
if you
important.
remember that, and you were probably really
And my
young.
mother always listened to our prayers at night when we were small and taught us to pray. And if any of us were ever ill, they were so far away from doctors that my father always administered to us.
Because he had the priesthood.
He had the priesthood, and that's all we ever had. We didn't have doctors. No matter what was wrong with us, we would just have, our father would just administer to us. And of course our mother would pray too. She had a lot of power in her hands, and because she had so much faith.
Do you think that she was the religious leader of your home, or was it 50-50? Was she was real strong, and your father was
very
too?
strong, and he was too, but he didn't make as much effort to go to church or to see that we got to church as she did. She wanted us to go to church, although my father and mother didn't go that much because they didn't have the clothes and they didn't have this and that, but my mother saw that us kids went to church when we were there so we could. Half the time, though, we were up at the mill where we couldn't go to church, so we would just hold a kind of little religious church at home. We'd have singing and sing the gospel and the songs, gospel songs, I'll get it right. And my father would play the accordion, and we'd all
really?
sing.
Huh, that sounds like a family home evening that we have nowadays.
And we just have it every once in a while.
Oh, that would be fun. I'd rather do
Really
that. I should erase that. Okay, let's see, you got that. Do you remember particularly a prayer of yours being answered, or of your families?
No, not while I was small, I don't, but I'm sure there were prayers answered every day because
that's all you had.
That's all we had was just the prayers, and we were in a lot of dangerous situations at that time. There were a lot of wild animals around, and it was just dangerous living up in the mountains like that. We'd hear wild animals at night that would scare you to death. And I'm sure we were protected from all the things just through prayer and faith.
Recreational activities.
Oh, we used to go huckleberrying and horseback riding. But it was always for a purpose. And then we would gather wood while we were out, and then the whole family, after the older ones got married and had their family, we'd all gather together and go picnicking out in the mountains, and And usually Rhoda, that's Jody's husband, would stay in the campground and cook the best stews and all kind of things. He'd have the best meals ready for us when we came off the mountain with our berries. Or other times we'd just take a lunch. But my mother was always cooking good things on the campfire, and she'd take good things for them. Everybody
that sounds
pitched
great.
in. We just had a wonderful time together.
That sounds like it. Just think of all the people that are trying to get back to that kind of
Yes.
way of
And
life.
we had it all the time.
Did you think it was good then? When you
Oh,
had it?
we loved it. That was wonderful when we could do that.
I'd love to.
We'd have to, my father would put the oxen on, hook them onto the wagon. We'd get on that old scary wagon and go through a creek. And great big rocks in it, and I remember going over those rocks, sitting on the wagon, and I knew I was going to fall off. And then while we were huckleberrying, he would load that up with logs, bring them into the sawmill, him and the older boys, while the women and kids all gathered huckleberries. But it was fun. For the kids anyway. I suppose it was hard work for the people, the older ones.
Well, I'm interested about you, and you were a kid, so.
Yeah, I was that kid.
Okay, your baptism, from your certificate I can get who did it and everything, but do you have some particular impressions about it, or how did it occur? Was it in a church, or was it in a lake?
No, it was out in our field, in a stream of water.
Was it very deep?
I suppose it
Must
was.
have been deep enough to be baptized. Was it cold? Do you remember anything about it?
No, I really don't. I just remember being baptized and having an old white dress on or something. I don't know. I don't remember.
And there were other people baptized?
Yes, there were other people baptized at the time.
How many did you say? 5 or something? 4 or 5?
I think Jareen was baptized at the same time, and Elmer and Dave. Now, I'm not sure about that, but I think they were.
From their stories they'll tell us.
Our bishop baptized Harry Hatch.
Oh.
And he was a good, sweet man.
Well, it must have been when there was warm weather. It must have been in the summer.
Yes, it was in the summer.
Okay. Your home tasks, like responsibilities, did you get any kind of allowances, or, if you did this, if you did the dishes or something, you'd get something or anything like
we
that?
didn't know what money was. But I remember when I was in school, every night my job was peeling potatoes. And I'd stand there and peel potatoes for so many of us. There was always so many people there eating. But I remember that was my main job, was peeling potatoes.
Then, did you grow potatoes?
Yes, we had gardens. We had a garden every summer. And I remember having to weed that garden. And I had a hatred for weeding gardens, which is awful. But the sun was so hot and miserable. And I wanted to go play.
Let's see, did your mom have any outside occupation outside of the home?
She worked in the field a lot, helped in the different things, besides doing all the cooking and making a dozen loaves of bread a day. When she would help out with the milking and different things when the men were working in the fields or in the mountains. She was always helping with everything.
Now for your schools. Did you go to elementary school?
Yes. And we had to walk, naturally. And
could you go every day even though you had to walk?
no, the weather was bad. Sometimes we couldn't go. But when the Chase family moved there. They had a girl my age, and her and I were the best of friends. That was Lucille. And her mother would pick me up when she'd go to school, and she would take me to school every day.
What convenience? What did you ride in?
We rode in a buggy when the weather was before the snow came, and then she had a little sleigh.
Was it drawn by horses?
Yes.
A horse or something?
And she would pick us up. We'd look out, and here she'd come with her whips and whipping that old horse, and the way we'd go, she'd have her 3 girls in it, and she would pick up me, and before Dave and Elmer got out of school, she'd take us off.
What time? Was that early in the morning?
Yes, that was early in the morning. We'd have to leave. Well, we'd have to be to school, I don't know what time. Possibly
Probably
8:30 or 9, I don't remember. And then she'd come and pick us up. If she didn't come, we had to walk, because no one else would take us.
Did school last, how long did it last when you'd go there? 6 hours?
Probably, well, I don't know for sure, but let's say it from 9 until 3.
Oh, just regular time.
Mm-hmm. And we'd have to take lunch.
Do you remember any particular teachers or what things you studied or activities that you had?
There was a Miss Duncan that I remember. She was my 2nd grade teacher, and she was the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. And so kind and nice to me. And then there was a Mr. Lowe. He taught the older grades, and he played the piano, and he was a music teacher. He had been a music teacher. And I remember he gave me some vocal lessons. He heard me sing, and he thought I had such a wonderful voice. He said I should have training. And he gave me a few vocal lessons. And he taught me a song to sing at the Christmas program. And I had to sing that song and rock my doll and sing Sweet and Low in the church for the program. I always
Did you all go to school in the same room? Did you have a 1-room?
It was a 2-room schoolhouse.
Was it a little red schoolhouse?
Yes.
Oh!
Let's see. Did you have any particular achievements at school that you were interested in?
I had several certificates for never being late or tardy or never missing a day, which was very unusual for anyone living at that time when the weather's so bad, but I have a lot of certificates from that. And then I was good at spelling, believe it or not, at that time. I don't know what happened to me now.
You're good now. You're shorthand for spelling.
Yeah.
Probably.
What everybody says.
Okay. Your primary?
I do remember attending primary. Of course, we always had to walk. I don't know how many miles it was to the church, but it seemed to me it was a very long way because I was just little and had short legs. But we would attend primary whenever we weren't up at the mill. They just held primary in the summertime, not in the winter.
Oh.
I think.
It seems that way. But, and you said you liked to do they had lots of dancing and it was different.
They did. They had a lot of dancing in primary and activities that were fun for us kids.
Did they have lessons?
They probably did. I don't really remember.
So what you remember is the activities?
I just remember the dancing.
That's interesting.
And the fun. And being
well, that's good.
kids.
That you just remember the good parts.
Yes.
Let's see. Okay, dancing. Were you in? Oh, And they didn't have mutual in your ward, that's right?
They didn't have mutual, no,
Okay.
in our ward.
Did they have seminary?
They did in high school.
Did you go to high school?
No, not in Bridge,
Oh.
no. Not until I got older. After I was married, then I started taking courses in high school.
Were you in any kind of drama or sports?
I was always in the school plays and in the church plays. I always took part. And I remember one time I had to be a butterfly. And Sarah made me the most beautiful costume. And I took the prize for having the best costume. And it had wings on it. She had made it with wires in it, and I'd put my arms up and I had wings, and it was pink.
How old were you?
Oh, I was probably 8
Oh,
or
but that
9,
was-
somewhere along there. But I took the prize for having the best costume.
let's see. Was there any particular, who do you think influenced you the most as far as your brothers and sisters went, or your parents or your grandparents?
Well, I think Sarah did more for us. If it hadn't been for Sarah, we would have never gone to school because she stayed on the ranch and took care of us, of the younger kids, while my mother and father was at the mill. During the early fall, she would come and see that we got to school. And she was right there to help us with our lessons, and she taught me how to write more than I learned in school. And she would see that we got our lessons as long as she was home. Why, she saw that we younger kids got to school and had some of the advantages we needed. And if it hadn't been for her, we wouldn't have gotten anything.
So she had already been to school then, and she was educated,
Yes.
so she could help you with
Yes.
your studies.
And she was just a second mother. I don't know what we would have ever done without her. She was really wonderful. She took the place of our mother because her mother had to be up at the mill cooking for the men and stuff.
Do you remember any particular church authorities that may have influenced you?
Bishop Hatch was a wonderful person. He tried to help everyone, I think, in the ward, but he was especially kind to our family. And the two of his sons used to live with us part of the time. That was Joe and Lawrence. Now, I don't know why they lived with us, except they were good friends of my brother Joe. But we always had extra people there. My mother had such a big family, but there were always extra fellows living there that would stay with the boys that she had to cook for and do for. And she did it cheerfully. I don't know how.
I don't know why.
No.
Foolish woman. So how many brothers and sisters did you have living at the home at one time before anybody moved away? When you were all there together, how many?
There were 11 of us.
Wow.
Mame was already married before I was born. She was married and had a child before I was born. And then Will got married. I guess I was about 4 years old when he got married.
Did he move out or did he stay with you?
He lived there. They built a house right by the mill, right close to our house at the mill. And they built Will and Opal lived there. And then he built him a house on the ranch, and they lived right close by us. And then Jody got married and moved away, and I don't remember too much about that, except I didn't want her to go. I was probably 4 years old at the time. And then I was older when Tom and Dick got married. And they'd live with us in the winter time, and in the summer they lived on their dry farms or somewhere. But there was a lot of us lived together all the time. Many people, how my mother put up with it. Oh. And then they kept
probably
having,
helped a lot.
they helped, and then they had children, bring all these children in there.
You must have had a big house, was it?
Not too
Or
big.
you were just crowded?
We had a big house when we lived on the Chase Ranch. That was before Chase bought the ranch. That was the house that Dave eventually bought. But that was a big house. It had an upstairs and it had several rooms upstairs. And I loved that house. My mother did too. And then my father didn't buy it. And we had to move back up to the ranch in a three-roomed house. And all of us crowded in that again.
Why didn't he buy it? Do you know why?
He felt like he couldn't afford it. To buy that and to buy the one he had, the other one he had. He thought the other one was a better ranch. I don't understand what went on.
Yeah, maybe it was a better ranch. You just
It
were little
could have
ones,
been.
so you didn't know.
And then he also had the ranch out at St. Anthony. He kept that. And in the winter months, in the fall of the year, they would take the cattle out there. They had they called it the sheep camp. And they would take that out to the ranch in near St. Anthony and take the cattle out there. They'd have about a 3-day cattle drive to take the cattle out there in the fall. And they'd feed them there in the winter. They had their hay out there. They'd feed the cattle there in the winter time. Then in the spring they'd bring them back. And I remember getting in that sheep camp, and they always had jam and boughten bread. And we always had homemade bread. And that was the biggest treat on earth, is to get that jam and some of that bread they bought at the store.
Now homemade bread is such a treat, too.
Oh, is it ever?
That's funny. Okay, now your courtship and marriage. Who were you married to and where? You first married.
I was married to Ray Harrop in Rexburg when I was 16, and he was 21.
How did you become acquainted, and do you remember any special dates, your first date?
Just to dances. We met at dances.
Church dances?
Church dances, and...
So he was a member of the church?
No, he wasn't.
Oh, he just went to the dance?
Yeah, he went to the dance.
Was that the only social event in town, so everybody went?
That was the only thing they ever had was dances.
Yeah.
And everybody attended the dances. Once or twice a week there were dances constantly all over the valley in the church house. And then they built a place called the Pines where everybody danced and they had such a good time. But that was a kind of a wild place where there was a lot of drinking and everything going on there. But I didn't attend those dances too much, not until after I was married. We went a few times.
Do you remember your first date with him? Or did you ever go on a date with him where you just met him and you just...
We just met and danced, and then he'd say, well, he'd pick me up next week, and then we'd go to another dance.
Dance.
That's all we did was dance. It's about all our dates amounted to, was just going to dances. And he had a car, and I thought he was so sporty because he had a car of his own.
What kind of car was it?
He had a Model T Ford. No, it was a Model A Ford. And in the winter, we would go in a sleigh, and they had a cover over the sleigh, and a stove in there, and after the dance, we would have oyster stew, open a can of oysters, and put canned milk in it, and then have those little oyster crackers.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so good, and we would eat that. And there'd be, the sleigh would be full of people. There'd be eight or 10 people in the sleigh at a time, and we'd have so much fun. Sometimes we wouldn't get home until 2 or 3 o'clock because
Where would you go?
it'd take that long to drive in the sleigh.
Really?
We'd clear across the valley with the horses, and we'd cook on the way. We had a little stove in there, and we'd cook.
Huh.
And that was a lot of fun.
I've heard of accidents where they tipped over in the stoves.
Yeah.
The first time I heard about that, I thought that was really strange to have a stove on a sleigh. But that was your heater, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
keep it warm in there.
Okay, your wedding, honeymoon, first home.
Well, we had no wedding except civil ceremony. A judge married us.
In town, or were you at somebody's house?
Yeah, at the courthouse.
Do you remember what you wore? Or what
I have no idea.
Okay.
Some kind of an old dress.
You didn't wear pants. Did you have a honeymoon, or did you?
No, we just went to his home and lived. That was it. And we went up to the cattle camp in the summer. We took cattle up there, and we had a sheep camp that we lived in all summer long. And we had horses. We had to go out and take care of the cattle and see that they didn't stray. And we were riding horses constantly and cooking in that miserable place. I thought it was fun then. I didn't know it was miserable.
Young and in love. So he had his own home then when you got married. He already had a house built.
No, it was his parents' home.
Were they still living there?
Oh yes, they lived there. We lived
so you
with
just
them.
moved in with them.
But and then we had the one room that we moved in, and we put a stove in there, and we used crates for our dishes, the whole bit. We made a cabinet out of a bunch of crates and stuff.
Sounds familiar.
We could afford to buy one, so now they're going back to these orange crates.
Let's see. Did you have an engagement party or anything like that?
No, we had no parties, nothing.
Did you have a reception after your wedding?
No.
Did you get any gifts?
No.
Did anybody know you got married?
They didn't care. Everybody was poor, and they didn't pay any attention to that. People just go get married, and that's all. They didn't have big weddings at that time. Very few of them had big weddings, except the ones that went through the temple, were married in the temple.
Then they would have a reception afterwards.
Yeah, but at that time, people didn't do much. They didn't celebrate birthdays and things like they do now because they just couldn't afford it. They didn't have money to buy gifts for anyone.
Was there the Idaho Falls Temple there, or did you have to go to Salt Lake to be married in the temple?
You had to go to Salt Lake.
That'd be quite a trip.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. You didn't have a vacation. Okay, your children. Names. Just tell me the names, because of the dates and places of birth I had already.
Bonnie was the only one that lived. Bonnie Ray. But I had 3 that passed away.
When
that
they
died
were
at birth.
babies. Okay. Now I guess. Okay, now talk about your. You can talk about my mom for a minute. Her characteristics, habits, clever or unusual sayings and doings.
Oh, she was the most beautiful baby on earth.
Well, she's sitting right
Blonde
here.
hair and blue
I'll
eyes.
leave if you like.
And such a lovable, fat, little chunky. Happy baby. She was happy and good. She never caused any trouble at all when she was little. She was such a good baby, and and such a happy, healthy little baby, except that she got the whooping cough,
You got whooping
and then
cough?
she almost died, and she's had that cough ever since.
Oh, sounds like an old crane.
But she would pass out when she had the whooping cough. She'd cough until she'd pass right out. And a lot of the times, I would be left alone with her. I don't know whether I should say that. I'll say it and then you can leave it out.
Okay.
But her father drank a lot, and he would leave us on the ranch alone for
When
weeks
he'd
at
go
a
out or
time.
something?
He'd go out. We finally were on in an old cabin on a ranch, and we'd be there alone, without a car, without anything, and half the time without anything in the house. And she had whooping cough, and she'd pass out, and all I could do was run with her and try to get to the neighbors, and I had a miserable, unhappy life. He was a miserable human being, if there ever was one.
Was he selfish?
He was selfish, he was mean, he was a terrible person. I left him time after time, he'd come get me and take me back. But I had no place to go except to my mother, and they were so poor, they had nothing.
They couldn't afford to have you either, probably.
That's right, they couldn't. But he was a horrible person. I hate to say that about him, but he was. He was good looking, and all the gals loved him. And I thought I was so fortunate because I got him. You don't need to put this into the story.
Okay, I will.
But I wasn't. I was the most unlucky one of all because he was such a horrible person. He would sulk and he would be mean and he wouldn't talk for days and I wouldn't know what was wrong with him. And then he'd hit me and knock me around. I have scars on my face where he hit me for no reason. He'd get drunk and come home and beat me up and black my eyes. And
how soon after you were married did you know this?
he started right away. Right away he started that, and I wouldn't dare say anything to anybody about it because I didn't know what to do. Because I had been babied all my life. Everybody loved me. I thought the world loved me. I was such a doll. But then I found out that the world don't love you. But he was a very mean person. And it was because he was so badly spoiled. He was the baby. He had anything on earth he wanted. And he was so mean to his mother. He talked so mean to her, and because his father was mean to her too.
Did he come from a big family?
Yes, he had, well, his father had, what was it? Let's see, his father had 3 boys and 2 girls when he married Grandma Harrop. And then they had three girls and 2 boys.
And he was the baby of all
He
that.
was the baby and very spoiled, and because he was very good looking. And I don't know much what he's for him, but because
Rotten.
but he really was a mean person.
I remember one time when he pushed you off the chair and beat you, and I was just probably 4
Just a
years
baby.
old.
Yeah, you couldn't have been older than 4.
But he was mean to everybody, except then he'd put on this, when he'd go out in company, he was so charming and sweet to people. Why, you wouldn't think that he'd be such a mean, hateful person. But he was just really a mean person. And Brenda was kind of mean too. I think those 2 were mean. She'd get drunk and she'd just throw things around and really be mean.
Did his dad drink or something? So it's very
His dad was a very bad drunkard. He'd go get drunk for weeks at a time. And that's the way Ray would do. He'd get drunk for a week at a time, sometimes 2 weeks, and I wouldn't know where he was or anything. When my last baby was born, he came to the hospital. He was with me when she was born and she died. And then he came and he was going to take her up to have her buried. And he came and took her, and he had Bonnie with him. And he brought her to the hospital to see me, and he took the baby, and then he never came back. And I didn't know where Bonnie was, and he never came back until for 10 days. I never had one soul come to visit me in the hospital in those 10 days.